This video will cover how to select keywords for your education searches. This is specifically designed for students in the education graduate program. So before you start typing in things randomly, either in Google or in one of our databases, you want to have a general idea of what you're looking for. Research typically begins with a research question. It can be a problem statement, it can be a hypothesis you'd like to test, it can be a specific question. So if I started with a problem statement, teachers are feeling more stress because of the STAR test. Presumably I'm going to do studies about this, and I'm interested in different aspects of this problem statement. So I would probably begin with the step of breaking this down into a bunch of different packets. Normally with the kind of research you're doing at this level, your questions do need to be broken down into smaller bite-sized pieces. From this, I can easily come up with 4 questions just off the top of my head, including how can teacher stress, which is caused by the STAR test, be managed? What are the indicators of teacher stress? What is causing the STAR test to be stressful to teachers? What are the consequences of teacher stress? And this comes specifically from just a brainstorming session. After I brainstorm those questions, I may want to put them in the order in which I would ask them or research them in the databases. And I did that, and when I was done with that, I went through and I underlined the main nouns. You'll notice I often also underline some things that are actually adverbs and verbs, but in their noun form. And that's typically what I'll want to be researching. It's easiest to think of find the nouns in your search. That's in your question. That's going to be the first thing you want to start when creating a search. Once I have my keywords underlined, I'm going to pick one of these questions to start doing my research on. Now, because I do have these in the order that I would want to look at them, such as indicators of teacher stress, I would probably do indicators teacher stress first, but I can get a little better examples out of this last one, teacher stress, STAR test, managed. And I would jot those down. My first step in creating my keywords is underlining the nouns. My next step is coming up with synonyms for those. So a synonym for teacher stress could be teacher job stress, or it could be teacher burnout. A synonym for the STAR test could be Texas Educational Standards, because that's what it's measuring, or the Texas Essential Knowledge and Skills, because that's what it's measuring. For managed, my synonyms or my related terms could be coping or resilience. And so brainstorm this. It can also come from a Google search. Some of these terms I actually did get from doing a Google search of causes of teacher stress, which again would have been one of my first 2 searches. When I start a search, maybe I end up with too many results. And so I like to think of how I can make my searches more broad or more narrow. Now, some of these terms need to be broader and some of these terms need to be narrower. I can tell you right now, the STAR test, I probably should be doing a broader search, not a narrower one. But for example, if I'm looking at teacher stress, ways to make this narrower. I could consider the causes of teacher stress. I could consider lack of autonomy, parental support, student bullying, administration support, workload. I could consider which teachers are getting stressed out, elementary school, middle school, secondary. I could consider consequences of teacher stress, so I could look specifically at how often teachers quit. I could look at teacher pay, things like that could all be brought into narrowing teacher stress. If I wanted to narrow the STAR test as a search, I could look specifically at the math assessment, reading assessment, writing assessment, or a specific grade level. So I could look at subject or grade level assessment. And then for management, I could look very specifically at management techniques or issues that could help manage teacher stress. One thing I saw frequently was motivating teachers, training teachers, time management for teachers. Those did typically show up a lot as narrower focuses of managing teacher stress. But sometimes I do need it to be broader. If I'm not finding enough on teacher stress, I could always look at work-related stress in general. In this situation, I would want to be broader with the STAR test, and I would want to look at standardized test, achievement test. I could do writing evaluation or writing assessment. So those are terms that I could be using instead of the specific STAR test, because STAR is only in Texas. I may want to look at what Indiana is doing or New York is doing. Maybe they've come up with ways of ameliorating stress because of their standardized testing. Next, if you'll notice in the terms over here, I've got the terms manage, management, managed, manages. These all have the exact same root, manage. But I don't want to have to type all of those into the database. If I do an asterisk, which is Shift 8, it will search for anything that starts with the phrase manage, that starts with those 6 letters, and anything that comes after it. It will search for those. I can do the same thing with administration or administrator. I would end it at administrat, and then let it search anything after that. Once I have some terms figured out, I need to start putting them together for my search. Anytime I have a phrase that needs to be exactly searched, I would want to put these quotation marks around. Now, this is actually an example of when you wouldn't want to put quotation marks around it, because I could have teacher stress, but I could also want to look for stress by teachers, or teachers experience stress, or something like that. Searching teacher stress exactly in quotes won't even find teachers and stress. So be very careful about using the quotes. You'll notice in between each phrase I have the word or. So anytime I want to look for similar terms, but I'm not entirely sure what they're going to call it, I don't care if they come back with stress or burnout, I can use the term or. The terms I picked for STAR test, I may want to look for STAR test, standardized test, or achievement test. If I leave it in quotes, it will only look exactly for these terms. But if I take out the quotes, it will actually still look for testing. So I could have achievement testing, not just test. And then if I look for, in this situation, coping or manage with an asterisk, because those are the 2 aspects that I was most interested in. When I get ready to write these together, I put these similar ideas. All my teacher stress ideas are going to go in parentheses together. Each of the phrases will be separated by the term or, and the whole thing will be set off by parentheses. All of my STAR testing will be together in parentheses. All of my coping and management will be together in parentheses. Then I will separate those parenthesis sets with the term and. That will tell the computer, I want you to find anything out of here, anything out of here, anything out of here, but they have to have at least one from each of these sets before you return back an article to me. What this looks like typed out would be the parentheses teacher stress or teacher burnout or job stress, and STAR test or standardized test or achievement test, and coping or manage with an asterisk, setting each of these off with parentheses. Those of you who remember algebra, you may remember, please excuse my dear Aunt Sally, parentheses, so it will consider what's happening in parentheses, and then addition and subtraction. So and or can be considered as addition terms. So it will look at what's happening inside the parentheses first. Couple of things to be aware of when you're starting to write down your search terms. Try not to use abbreviations. Most of the time in APA style, which is what you're writing with and with what most educators will write with, the APA style says do not use an abbreviation in the title or in the abstract. Well, that's what your database is going to be searching. It's going to be searching the title and the abstract. So don't use abbreviations. Try and spell the whole thing out. Don't use trade names, and if you do, try it with the trade name, and then try and see if you can find a more general term. The example I have is Envision Math. That was the math curriculum at my son's school. And it may be not what the researchers are using specifically in their term. They may not want to use a copyright phrase. They may want to use a more general phrase. So try not to use the trade names if possible. If you want to know what a trade name's general term is, Google the company, Google Envision Math, and see how they describe their own math curriculum, or just use a term like math curriculum. And also be careful about using a term specific to one school district, or even to one textbook publisher. Sometimes researchers will call it one thing, but your school will call it something else. In my son's school, they have PRIDE, and this is an acronym that they use to show as a student motivation tool. But this is not going to be a universal term, so if I searched that, it would really confuse the computers. In the next video in this series, we will put these keywords into the databases and find some articles.